around the world are taking a new dimension, and technology is now at the center of modern warfare. But when you step away from that global headline, there's a different reality. When you step away, a different reality emerges. Terror groups are adapting. Drones are now in the hands of non-state actors. And countries like Nigeria are still battling the evolving threats with limited systems. So the question is technology making the world safer or simply making violence more sophisticated? Today on The Beam, we ask, can AI and drones actually transform security in Nigeria? Or are we entering into a new era of warfare that we are not prepared for? It goes beyond the buzzwords. What does the future of warfare really look like? On this note, let me welcome you to The Beam, where curiosity stirs conversations, taking us a step further into the future we desire. Here we bring you the issues that matter, the voices that challenge, and the insights that inspire. I'm Sunes Nathaniel, and today we turn our attention to the future of security, warfare, and technology. Is it making us safer or changing the nature of the dangers that we face? Joining me right now is Professor Freedom Onoha, Coordinator, Security and Violence and Conflict Research Group at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. Prof, you're welcome to this very important discussion.
Thank you, Sunes, for having me in your program.
All right, let's start here. Recently, we saw that very important report where the Pentagon is now moving to an AI-first, approach when it comes to warfare. Are we then witnessing the end of human-controlled warfare?
I don't think we are witnessing the end of human-controlled warfare. I think we are only seeing increasing adaptation of the highest level of sophistication of technology in battlefield, in defense planning, and in strategic endeavors that has consistently and reliably going to change the future of warfare. And I guess the reason why Pentagon is trying to more especially embrace AI is because of the fundamental transformations and achievements we have seen in latest conflict theater, where the integration and leveraging of AI has played a fundamental role, in changing the entire character of warfare. If you reflect back to what happened in Gaza in the early period between Israel-Hamas confrontation, you can see that the Israeli forces leveraged two critical AI enablers, to change the entire feature of that conflict. Number one was the leveraging of the Lavender. And, the Lavender was a sophisticated AI targeting tool that integrates, an amount of information gotten from communication, social media activity, and behavioral patterns, to be able to identify some potential targets affiliated to Hamas. That in itself played a key part in identifying over 37,000 targets, Hamas targets, within a very short period. So that enhances the decision-making capabilities of defense planners and war operators, to quickly target and eliminate an enemy. And that also was complemented, as I've mentioned, with the Big Daddy. So where is Daddy was another AI enabled to specifically used for tracking. So the result is that once the Big Daddy allocates you, it tracks you up to the moment when you get your residential building. The idea is therefore that you are using one stone to kill two birds, where we see it from Israeli forces. So once you are residential building, it does suggest that you are home. And I think that's what informed the naming of that technology. Where is that? So that can activate, targeting attacks from Israeli forces that would then eliminate the target and potentially also even eliminate the families or members or relatives of that target. So I think the sitting back, the U.S. defense planners have seen, the enormous potentials of AI to transform the battle space. And indeed, I think it's going to be a major factor in the definition and character of warfare in the 21st century. So I don't think they want to be a latecomer in this affair. I think they want to be at the forefront of deployment and usage of this artificial intelligence to their own decisive advantage in the battlefield.
Yeah, it's lovely you have said that, because you just cued me to my next question, where it becomes, since it's becoming central, to warfare, since AI is becoming really central to warfare, what happens to countries that do not control their data, their algorithms and the infrastructure behind it? What happens to those countries?
Yeah, it's a very simple thing. That has been the trajectory of the use, development, and application of technology. They will continue to be the latecomers and also likely the losers. And of course, they're going to be dependent on whatever the innovators or those who are at the forefront of developing this AI will do. A typical example, AI is built on a lot of algorithms. It's also built on a lot of language that are defined by the developers. So for countries that are not at the forefront of developing these algorithms, developing this platform, developing these tools, they can only be receivers. The result, therefore, is that it will not be adopted to the basic and peculiar needs of those countries. They are just receivers of these technologies and these tools, which means there's going to be serious operational limitations of the usage of those tools by these countries that are receiving it, because they are not actually the originators or those that have developed it. And it goes a long way, to actually strengthen what we know, in the terms of the inequality that has to do with technological development, application, and adaptation. For countries in the third world, they've not been at the forefront of developing these technologies. And that's why we will lag behind. That's why we'll be the losers. And that's why we have a lot of loopholes in applying these technologies to address our own peculiar security challenges. But that's not the end of the road. I think it calls to, to mind the need for us to begin to think ahead, to see how we can begin to develop our own knowledge base to be able to at least adopt these technologies and do what they call reverse engineering. So if you're not the original developer of this engineering or these tools, you can actually adopt the basics, look at it, and then see how you can reverse the entire engineering metrics and principles and logics that inform such a technology, such that you can adapt it to your own local environment to be able to address your own specific needs. But for me, I think we are latecomers, and we are still going to suffer the consequences of being a latecomer to any particular technological party.
Do you fear then that we are getting into an era where the private tech companies are going to be the ones to determine the future of war and warfare, and not the governments of various nations? Are you afraid that we're coming to that era?
Are we already in the era? I will not say that I'm afraid that we are coming to the era. We're already in the era, because if you look at the trajectory of the development of technology and the application, whether you're talking about application in commerce, talking about application in medicine, or you're talking about application in technology, we have now seen a fundamental shift in terms of the ability of private tech companies to be the ones that are developing some of the technologies that are defining the future of human welfare. And that is creating a lot of problems, what we now call techno-power. I think it's the scholar Ian Bremen that is at the forefront of trying to articulate, expound, and actually reflect on the utility of this concept of techno-power, which suggests the increasing capability of private technological companies to develop the kind of technology that will define the future of the human race. And by implication, it's taking that ascendancy over state power and defining some of the issues, defining some of the communications, and defining some of the businesses and transactions. Look, take for example, the unique position that Elon Musk stands now in terms of his SpaceX. So who could have thought 30 years ago that you can have a private individual underpinning and sustaining travels in the space, to the extent that even the United States NASA depend on some of the facilities, technological facilities that is being provided by SpaceX, that we are ordinarily relying on the Russians. That in itself gives you a clear indication that at least we're already in that techno-power era. And then that's the question and the challenges we're going to have. How do we then control these technological industries in such a way that these civilian technological industries will not really challenge the states, if not even overrun the states, given the decisive advantage that the technologies they are developing is conferring on them in terms of decision, in terms of economy, and also in terms of finance.
Wow, you really took it deep there, because it's one of those major important questions. How do we ensure that these guys do not turn against the states because they have all the information that is there? So let's just kick it with this way and say, hey, what happens when machines begin to assist us in warfare and make these life and death decisions? What really happens? Who is accountable?
Yeah, I think this is where the whole debate about the conflicts between operational necessity and legality of these AI-enabled tools and the ethics of it comes in. And I think there is nowhere I can think this has become all the more serious than in discussion about laws. The laws means legal autonomous weapon systems. And I did mention, in the earlier part of our conversation, the way and manner the Israelis leverage the lavender. And where is daddy, to do targeting, to do tracking, and more importantly, to do target elimination. The question is, When you are going to conduct this kind of elimination, there are chances that you're going to lead to collateral damage. For example, if Professor Freedom Honor is a militant, does it mean that the wife and the children are militant, for example, and you are using where is daddy? So where is daddy locates me in the Department of Political Science, and you did not eliminate me in the Department of Political Science, for example, then you waited when I've come to residential where my family is to eliminate me. The consequences, therefore, is that this technology is actually already inviting, if not imposing, a whole lot of collateral damage. And so the question is, what's the ethics? What is the limitations that we can impose on the use of this technology? I can assure you that that's a major question before strategic and defense planners. How do we develop a global standard norms, to regulate the use of artificial intelligence, particularly in military-related artificial intelligence in the battle spaces, so that we can minimize civilian casualties? But you should also know, Tunes, that in every war situation, you're also going to have civilian casualties. You're also going to have collateral damages. I've not seen any war situation, I've not seen any battlefield where you don't have this casualty. But I think that with the use of AI, to a very large extent, the question about the ethical use of AI will continue to resonate. But at the early stages of its adoption and application, I think that we are still going to record cases of collateral damages that will require, clear-eyed rules, guiding the application and deployment of these tools in warfare. Beyond even warfare, in every other aspect of human life, some of these tools have capacity to undermine private human rights. For example, if you use it for surveillance, you can actually use it to undermine the legitimate rights of protesters. So I think it's a question that defense planners, the question of social scientists and techno experts will grapple in the days ahead. My worry is that our ability to articulate some of those ethical standards is running far behind our capacity to generate and innovate these technologies.
So, you see, beyond this and beyond this narrative about the ethics of it is the fact that some of these tools, like you've rightly said, we might not be able to catch up as we are supposed to catch up, but some of these tools are already in the hands of the terrorists. And then the question becomes, they have access to, cheap drones. They have access to great technology of massive destruction, right? And does this whole concept make it more dangerous, for states like Nigeria, for nations like Nigeria, for African countries? Does it make it more dangerous?
Yes, in a sense, we can argue that it makes it dangerous, but it's also very dangerous from point of view of analysis to generalize that it makes it dangerous. I think that to receive these technologies, to plan well ahead of these technologies and have countermeasures. Like you've mentioned now, we have now seen fundamental transformation of the battle spaces as a result of the ability of non-state actors, violent extremist groups to deploy these technologies, not just even deploying them for intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, but what we call weaponized targeting, where people now, terror groups like the Jamaatul al-Sunnah, the Dawati Jihad, Islamic State West African Province, and the JNIM operating in the Sahel, are beginning to now adapt technology such as drones in such a way that you infuse or you implant what I mentioned, like reverse engineering. You can then improvise, put explosive devices on these tools or these platforms or these instruments in order to attack. So it's no longer a question about using technologies like drone for intelligence, for surveillance and reconnaissance. They've already upped the scale of their deployment. So if you have drones that has these AI capabilities, it can do pattern analysis for you, it can do terrain analysis for you, and that is very key in terms of operational planning of attacks. So I think to a very large extent is now a challenge between non-state actors and state actors, abilities of state actors to really think a step ahead and proactively adopt and deploy some of the countermeasures that will blunt non-state actors' use of these technologies. That's a rat race, and who wins that race is dependent on the capacity of states to think well ahead, resource their forces to be able to deal with this evolving security situation that is being changed by the application of AI and other technologies.
Prof, yes. Let's hold on there. I know there is so much you are going to offer us. Let's go on a break. And when we come back, we'll go deeper into what you're just discussing and what it really means, for AI to help secure Nigeria for today and for the future. Don't go away. Stay with us.